Let's delve into the amazing life of Gale Sayers both on and off the football field and see if you learn a fact or two that you may not have known. Now, while Gale Sayers was born in Wichita, Kansas, he actually grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. He later attended the University of Kansas, although it was not his first choice. Seems he really wanted to go to Iowa. Now, on to his professional career. He was drafted with the 4th overall pick in the 1965 draft by the Chicago Bears. The Bears had just won the NFL championship in 1963, so he was going to a pretty good team at this time. Sadly, he would spend his career on some really bad teams. Now, there are a couple of interesting side notes to this draft. First of all, even though he was the 4th pick in the first round by the Bears, he was not the Bears' first pick. The Bears also had the pick right before that, the 3rd pick, and they drafted a guy named Dick Butkus. So you may have heard of him too, since, he's a Hall of Famer also. Secondly, the American Football League was still battling the NFL. This was before these two leagues merged. So Gale Sayers was taken as the 5th pick in the first round by the Kansas City Chiefs. Now imagine for a moment if he had chosen to play for the Chiefs instead. Those Chiefs that would play in 2 Super Bowls in the next 5 seasons, playing alongside quarterback Len Dawson and all the great players on that team. But he went to the Bears, and that's okay, because Gale Sayers had the rookie season of rookie seasons. 1,000 yards rushing, a then NFL single season record of 22 touchdowns, 14 rushing, 6 receiving. He ran a punt back for a touchdown and ran a kickoff back for a touchdown. Now keep in mind that he played in an era of 14 regular season games, not the 16 game season we've been accustomed to. His averages during that rookie season of over 31 yards a kickoff return and nearly 15 yards a punt return are about 5 yards higher than any player in any other season you look at that leads the league. They were just amazing numbers. And in this era, no one would put their star draft pick out continuously returning punts and kickoffs. Now, while he wasn't able to score that amazing number of touchdowns during his sophomore campaign, the 66 season saw him with over 1,200 yards and winning the NFL rushing title. In the last game of the season, he ran for 197 yards, which was a Bear record at that time, and also ran a kickoff back for a touchdown. This was the first pro game that his parents were able to attend in person, so they got quite a show that day. 1967 saw his numbers decreasing as running duties were split between several running backs. And although he didn't break 1,000 yards, he was still elected to his 3rd Pro Bowl. And that brings us up to 1968, where his career and parts of his personal life would change forever. Leading the league in rushing and following up his best rushing game ever with 205 yards, the very next week he would suffer the first devastating knee injury. That was in week 9 against the 49ers. And despite missing the last 5 games of the season, he was elected to his 4th consecutive Pro Bowl. Now, an important point to remember is that 5 decades ago, medical knowledge was not what it is today. And athletes, especially runners, did not come back from these type of injuries. This was also the rehab that was done with Brian Piccolo, and most people know that name from the movie Brian's Song. Coming back in 1969, Gale Sayers led the league with 1,032 yards rushing and the Comeback Player of the Year award. Now, this was playing on a Chicago Bears team that had 1 win and 13 losses, tied for the worst record in the league. And as a side note, This is where NFL history again takes an interesting detour. The Bears were tied with the Pittsburgh Steelers for the very worst record in the league. And the elaborate tie-breaking processes that we have now didn't exist at that time. So the two teams simply had a coin toss, which was done, believe it or not, over the phone, with one team trusting the other for the rights to the first pick in the 1970 draft. The Pittsburgh Steelers won that coin toss and selected quarterback Terry Bradshaw, who went on to lead the Steelers to 4 Super Bowl wins in the decade of the 70s. There's a separate video on Mr. Bradshaw we think you'll find interesting as well. We'll link that down in the description section. Now, back to Gale. Sayers suffered another knee injury, although not as severe, in the 1970 preseason. Also during this time period, Brian Piccolo, that helped him with his rehab, passed away of cancer. Right after this, Gale Sayers wrote a book titled I Am Third that was turned into the movie Brian's Song that people became familiar with and became familiar with the friendship and the story and things between Brian Piccolo and Gale Sayers. So dealing with the loss of his friend, dealing with yet another knee injury, he tried to played sparingly in the first few games, finally gave up, had to have another knee surgery, and was done for the season. This is where, during rehab, he had time to write and do this book, and also had time to further his education even more, studying to be a stockbroker. Trying to come back again in the 1971 season, he was given very limited carries in the first few Bear games, had an ankle injury, and that ended that season. He tried again the 72 preseason, came back, one bad game, and, he just wasn't the same, and everyone knew it, and he knew it, so he retired before the 72 season began. Now, there's much more to the Gale Sayers story than football, but to sum up his career really quickly, he was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1977, despite having only played in about 68 regular season games. And if you put that in today's perspective, that would only be about 4.5 complete seasons of football. Unfortunately, Gale never got to play in a playoff game due to being stuck on some very mediocre Chicago Bears teams for virtually his entire career. It was just downhill from his rookie season right on down. So being drafted by a good team at the time, that team just unfortunately deteriorated quickly. Now, after the NFL, he went to work for several years at the University of Kansas, and then he became the athletic director at a small university in Illinois for 5 years. He was involved in a lot of different business ventures, most notably what's called the Crest Computer Supply Company, which I think was based out of Chicago and had offices in several different major cities. And that success of that company gave him a very comfortable life. It also allowed him and his wife to do a lot of philanthropy. And spend a lot. It also allowed him and his wife to do a lot of philanthropy and do things that helped a lot of other people. Gale Sayers passed away in 2020 at the age of 77 after having battled dementia for about the last decade. But he and his family, they left a mark on football, on business, and in the communities. But he and his family certainly left a mark, not just on NFL football, but on their communities and in the business community. If you're wondering what to watch next, go down the description. You'll find the links to other videos of famous people with facts you may not have known. And I appreciate you watching.